So the pandemic happened, and we're not laughing. The world is now on thin ice. The Olympics were canceled, but we've got it handled. The torch has been lit, so if the ski boots fit, we'll catch a paddle with the session every hour. Bronze and silver levels, but gold is our next medal. Grab your mask, grab your gloves, ride the half pipe of the discussion board. Take a ride on Cannonball. 21 Wizard Game fun, yeah. Rooting good, yeah. I wanna learn from you. Where do we go from here? We are dreamers, we are doers, we are drivers. No pandemic's gonna stop us thrivers. I've got, you've got, we've all got solutions in our head like shotgun in the box. EDU and some cities will never be the same at the Winter Games. Together we're racking our brains. 21 Wizard Game fun, yeah. Rooting good, yeah. I wanna learn from you. Where do we go from here? I wanna learn from you. Where do we go from here? Win or lose, we're a team. Change the world in unforeseen solutions. Reaction, life change. The ultimate make it fresh tracks. We're ablaze in the path for every nation, for future generations. Oh, the torch has been lit, and you're the best fit to be innovative, bold, and go for the gold. Yeah, 21 Wizard Game fun, yeah. Rooting good, yeah. I wanna learn from you. Where do we go from here? I wanna learn from you. I wanna hear from you. I just wanna see you. Where do we go from here?
Hello, hello. Welcome to Olympic Stadium for the first ever Shaping EDU Winter Games. The torch has officially been lit. If you've received your daily communication, you know that the Winter Games have officially begun, and I'm so excited to welcome you all today to the opening ceremony. Welcome one, welcome all. As you're coming into Olympic Stadium, I encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat. We want to hear about all the athletes and spectators joining us from around the world today. It's so good to see your faces. My name is Samantha Becker. You may know me as the woman who's been sending you a lot of emails about the Winter Games, but I am the University Technology Office at ASU's Executive Director for Creative and Communications, as well as the Community Director for Shaping EDU, which is the ASU initiative that is putting on this event. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Or, you know what, I'm just going to pull up my deck right now. Okay, so we've got a lot of excitement for you on the slopes at the ice rink in an Olympic Stadium today. But before we dive into our opening ceremony, I thought it might be helpful to share some information about who's all joining you for this digital immersion experience. So we have around 1,200 athletes or registrants. That's all of you here today. Thank you so much. We've got 80 presenters, or as we refer to them, Olympic coaches. We have more than 60 activities across our 3 days, plus some special activities that may fall outside some of the time parameters. We have 15 amazing co-conveners. Those are organizations or departments that have actually helped organize the Winter Games. and we'll get to those folks in just a little bit. And then we have 6 continents represented here at the Winter Games between our coaches and our athletes. So welcome one and welcome all. Something else to know, for those of you coming to us from ASU, you may already be aware and have been enjoying Innovation Quarter, which kicked off in December and is actually ending this Friday. Winter Games has the joy and honor of being the closing event, or the closing ceremony, if you will, of ASU's Innovation Quarter, which is all about extending culture and innovation conversations and activities online for students, for faculty, and for staff. Of course, none of this would be possible today and across the week without our amazing co-conveners. These aren't just sponsors, as you may know them for events. These are people that have been rolling up their sleeves, designing countless sessions and panels and activities, contributing their expertise, their presenters, their speakers, and helping us firm up what is going to be an incredible and illustrious program. So I want to give them a big shout out right now. Cox Business, thank you so much for being a lead diamond co-convener. Thank you to everyone at the University Technology Office who has supported this. And of course, a tremendous, huge, significant thank you to the Connective, representing a consortium of organizations across Arizona who are advancing the smart region. So thank you so much for making this possible. And of course, there's more. I mentioned 15. We've got Zoom as our platinum medal co-convener, which is so exciting. They'll be putting on a panel as well as a global concert tomorrow night. And I have to, of course, thank our amazing silver medalist co-conveners. Shout out to Adobe, AWS, the Arizona Commerce Authority, and of course, Slack. Many of them have joined us for previous Shaping EDU events. And so it's so great to have these organizations return and support the future of education and smart cities. And I want to give a big shout out to other departments at ASU, Mary Lou Fulton's Teacher College, who you'll be hearing from in just a few minutes, the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law, Social Embeddedness Network, Thunderbird School of Management, and of course, the University Design Institute, who I have to give a special shout out to because they've been responsible for putting on Innovation Week and much of Innovation Quarter, and have just done a phenomenal job opening up new opportunities and experiences for the global change-making community. And finally, a hearty thank you to our copper medalist co-conveners, Palo Alto Networks, and of course, Badger, who's responsible for some of the badges and medals that Lara, one of our directors, will be explaining to you about shortly. So once again, a virtual round of applause for all of our co-conveners. Thank you so much for dreaming, doing, and driving with us. Okay, I want to go ahead now and introduce some really special people in your Winter Games journey who are going to explain to you how the next few days are going to work. Erin Morrow and Lara Geringer are our 2 co-directors for the Shaping EDU Winter Games. And if you've been perusing the website and the program, you're familiar with a lot of the work that they've been doing. But Erin, I'd love to toss it over to you so you can give all of our athletes in the audience an idea of how the next few days is going to work.
Of course. So, next slide. Oh, so it'll be a 3-day. We have something for everybody. We're going to spend the next 3 days with you. We'll start like this. It's very exciting. I think our next slide actually is going to be a better representation of what it looks like. Oh, no, that's Laura's slide. Laura, would you like to talk about our location?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so Winter Games sessions will all take place via Zoom. And in the spirit of the Winter Olympics, different types of activities will take place at different venues. We'll all gather together in the Olympic Stadium, where we are right now, for the keynotes each morning. Breakout sessions will take place on the slopes and action-packed locations fit for a variety of change-making sports. Hackathons are held at the ice rink, where people play and try out new tricks. And we'll all come together again at the ski lodge for virtual hot chocolate, fireside conversation, and social activities each evening. Erin?
All right. All right, so like I said, we have something for everyone and every day. We're super excited to spend the next 3 days with you. And to make things as easy as possible, all 3 days are set up in basically the same format. Each day we'll meet like this at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time and hear from one of our fascinating keynote speakers. After 90 minutes of edge of your seat content from our renowned instructors, we're going to take a quick break before heading off to the rinks or the hackathons on the slopes and join breakouts or hackathon competitions starting at 10:45 Mountain Standard Time. During the next 105 minutes, you will have the opportunity to join 2 back-to-back breakout sessions or 1 amazing hackathon session. Regardless of which session you select, these wheelhouse instructors will take you on a fast-paced journey through some fantastic content. At 12:30, bring your lunch and join a quick 30-minute conversation around a variety of topics before we take an extended break. And then when we reunite at 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, recharged and invigorated, we will gather around the fireplace to have important and intimate discussions and celebrate the day's events with a social gathering. Sam?
Oh, that sounds awesome. I'm really looking forward, first and foremost, to the evening activity, the Après-Ski Social, because there's going to be an amazing Smart Region Gala tonight hosted by the Connective and Cox. And if you have not already checked out the information and are planning on heading there this evening, you're going to want to do that right now. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be a cultural experience. There's going to be fun music. It's really going to combine thought leadership and fun. So really looking forward to that. Thank you so much, Erin. So a little bit of background on Shaping EDU and why we're doing this event. So we actually put on a number of events year round. And I'm actually seeing a lot of folks in the audience who joined us for our summer event, Learning Human, which was our summer camp digital immersion experience for shaping the future of education. So you can see up here on the screen, kind of a more early representation of the Shaping EDU community. This is really a community of change makers. And we define change makers as anyone who's actively shaping the future of the world and is actively making a difference. That could be students, that could be faculty, that could be staff, technologists, and so on and so forth. Anyone can and should be empowered to be a change maker. You can learn more about our roots in the Shaping EDU community at the website mentioned here, as well as find other ways to get involved. And I'd also like to call in an audible right now and invite one of the founders of the Shaping EDU community, Lev Gonik, CIO of ASU, to just kind of come on so we could spotlight him and talk a little bit about kind of the history of the Shaping EDU community and what makes this community and initiative so special.
Actually, Lev had to run to an emergency meeting, Sam.
Oh, wow. Just like the regular Olympics. Folks, things happen. Okay, emergency meeting at the top of the mountain. We got this. So Shaping EDU was founded in 2018. With just 129 dreamer doers and drivers at an inaugural unconference that actually took place in Scottsdale, Arizona, at our Sky Song campus. After a successful gathering of, hey, what are we going to do to shape the future of education? What can we do? We put on an unconference the following year, as well as some digital events, and the community grew to more than 600. We started getting innovators and residents and mayors to manage these communities and projects. And last year, our community grew to over 3,000. So when we hosted the Learning Human event over the summer, we were so pleased that people took it as an opportunity during the pandemic to get involved in actually shaping what comes next, so that our community is now over 14,000 wide, and that's students, that's staff, that's faculty, that's technologists, that's education leaders, that's business leaders, and beyond, anyone who considers themselves a change maker. I want to call on one of our co-conveners and planners now, Diana Bowman, to talk a little bit about this intersection between education and smart region planning that we'll be getting at throughout the week with our activities. Di, tell us a little bit more about why we're bringing the smart city and education realms together.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Sam, I would just like to correct one thing in your introduction. You didn't actually say that you're also our resident unicorn. and add great delight and fun to our planning meetings and this event overall. And we're so grateful for everything you and the rest of the team have done. And it's my pleasure to talk about what we're doing here at ASU in terms of our smart campuses and how that has bled into the Smart City, Smart Region, and Smart State initiative. We always consider our campuses as a test bed or a learning bed, and that is in terms of how do we best serve our students, and that's everything in terms of their quality of life and getting them through in 4 years and graduating on time. But we also sit within multiple cities in the great state of Arizona, and we bleed into those cities and the regions. And so what we learn on campus actually gets to bleed into the cities and towns that we serve. And so everything that we do here at ASU is really about improving quality of life and serving our students, our community, and the state, and then taking what we've learned here and scaling. And so thinking about how do we do this within the US and across multiple continents. So I'm really excited to be part of these 3 days. There are going to be so many lessons from the front line, both in terms of locally here in the Greater Phoenix region, but our partners from everywhere from Nairobi to Seoul to London, Amsterdam. And this is really about how do we enable what we teach and learn here to really cross those boundaries. And we are so lucky to have phenomenal partners across, as I said, the region, the state, the country, and the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Di. We really appreciate you representing the Connective and also the College of Law right here at ASU. We really appreciated your leadership. And for everyone in the audience, Di will be moderating a number of panels this week, and you're just going to want to focus on all the ones that she's moderating and show up to those. Okay, I'd like to call Lara back up because there is a supply list available on the Winter Games website, and I'd love for Lara to tell you just about some of those supplies.
Hello again. Yes, so I'm putting a link in the chat to the Winter Games supplies page where you can find out more about all of our medals as well as some of the technology tools that you want to have access to throughout the week. So throughout Winter Games, you'll have the opportunity to earn medals or digital credentials for attending sessions and submitting ideas. There are badges for attending 2 sessions in the same track, for example, 2 sessions related to the theme of freestyling over the horizon. The multi-sport change agent badge is awarded to those who attend at least 1 session in each of our 3 tracks. Session presenters or coaches receive a badge for coaching a Winter Games session. And you can also earn medals for submitting ideas to shape the future and creating a scrapbook page or an athlete card. And if you earn at least 3 medals, you'll receive the coveted Olympic Changemaker badge. You can find out more and claim your badges on the Winter Games supplies page.
Thanks, Lara. I'm really looking forward to just racking up those medals and hopefully being the biggest medal owner. So everyone, that's a challenge. See if you get out medal. Okay, Lara, could you tell us a little bit about what we can expect this week and really our tenets across, all Shaping EDU events?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you move around the Winter Games Olympic Village, we ask that you do your part to contribute to fostering a safe and comfortable space for all participants. Our code of conduct sets expectations for behavior in Shaping EDU events, activities, and spaces, including the Winter Games. We ask you to be respectful, be empathetic, and be free. And being free in this context means that if you've selected an activity, for example, and find that it's not resonating with you, you're free to respectfully choose a different option. So exercise your agency here. If you exhibit behavior that is derogatory or inappropriate, you will be asked to leave. And more information can be found on the Shaping EDU About page, which I will put in the chat.
Yeah, don't be the athlete that gets ejected from the game. No one wants to be that person.
Certainly not. Our guiding tenets further describe the nature of Winter Games and the Shaping EDU community, both during and after this week together. So as Sam mentioned, this is an ongoing community. We value individuals over affiliations. So show up as yourself. We strive to serve people, and we dream big, collaborate to bring our visions to life, and nurture every seedling of success. Sam?
Thank you so much, Lara. I'm really, with that all said, I'm really looking forward to dreaming, doing, and driving with all of our athletes. There's a lot of people to thank. Aaron and Lara, thank you so much for being amazing co-directors of this whole Olympic experience. Aaron, you want to tell us all who else was involved?
Absolutely. That, and to let you guys know exactly who you're going to see all week, I figure. So, as you've met, myself and Lara were the co-directors that helped, go the distance to pull this event together. But we couldn't have done it without our talented Jocelyn Hernandez, who was the assistant director. She helped us knock out all the details, big and small. Stephanie, you will see around, is our lead correspondent, writing hot off the press details to get you ready and keep you going for the next 3 days. Annie, our amazing co-convener liaison, kept everyone's eye on the prize to bring the best and the brightest to join our team. Of course, there's Samantha Becker and Lev Gonik, who were our Olympic trainers who made sure to, get everything pushed over the goal line. They kept us in shape. And then Elise is our unbelievable art director who's going to be creating stunning graphic recordings during the keynotes, firesides, and some of the hackathons. So keep an eye out for her video and to see her create visual notes live. Then there's Wark Pond, our music director, who brought music to our ears literally by creating the best Olympic theme song and organizing the live concert, which will be tomorrow. And then Clarice was amazing, and she put together the beautiful graphics behind me, helping us create the backdrop for the Winter Games theme that we are here. And then Seth and Shane will be with us for the next 3 days to coach us through, to guide us through any issues and help us with the support to make this the most successful event. But it doesn't stop there. The Winter Games was able to branch out beyond our main team, and we got the Connective team to join us this year. So we added so many experienced athletes from the Connective. Dominic, Di, Brian, Chris, and John were amazing recruited talent. They went out, recruited talented players, created sharp content, and proved to be brilliant coaches to move us along. With their help, we were able to elevate the smart city conversation and intertwine the discussion with our higher ed goals. You will see Di with Samantha all week, emceeing in the mornings for sure, as well as many other places.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have to just personally thank the Connective team just for organizing an unbelievable number of engaging sessions. They're going to be unlike many sessions that you've maybe experienced in the past. There's a future of mobility session. There's a sports and entertainment, unlocking data-driven practices. There really is something for everyone thanks to the Connective. And please don't be shy about heading to the gala tonight. Even if you're not that person who's been involved in smart communities work, you're maybe more in the EDU side, this is actually a great opportunity to learn what it's all about and actually live at the intersection this evening. So make sure that you're on the website reading about the gala and that you're planning on joining us tonight. So thank you, Team Connective. Aaron, what else do we need to know about the other digital location where things will be happening for this event?
I am super excited to say that a core part of the Winter Games conversation is going to be elevated through Slack channels. And hopefully everyone here is already in the channel and they're participating because the conversation has been beyond exciting for the past couple days. Some of the key channels that you want to really keep an eye out for are the Winter Games 2021. This is your main channel that we're going to use to connect with all of you. Feel free to use this for discussions, sharing materials, and just having a good time. And then once the Winter Games is over, the channel is going to stay open to allow us to keep together, work as a community, keep good discussions going. And then if you have any issues, there's the Winter Games help desk, very important. If there's a question or technical difficulty, please let us know. We have people watching all day. We're kind of like a hotline. We are there 24 hours a day, here to help you, whenever you need us. And then the coaches and volunteers have some special channels also if we need anything else. So join us on Slack.
And thank you to our numerous volunteers comprising that Winter Games volunteers channel. You'll see a lot of them moderating our Zoom sessions as well. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Yeah.
All All right. Well, without further ado, it's really time to get into the main event, the main attraction. I'm metaphorically lighting another torch. I'm so excited to introduce my friends and colleagues from ASU's Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. Joining us today are Punya Mishra, Sean Leahy, and Jodie Donner, and they will be presenting Learning Futures, Designing the Horizon. The pandemic has definitely posed a lot of challenges to us and a lot of questions about where do we go from here. But to answer that question involves a lot of collaboration and deep thinking. And so I'm going to invite my friends at Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College to lead us through a presentation that starts to kind of peel back the layers so that we can really design what's over the horizon together. Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College really does a lot of innovative work on a daily basis across ASU, from connecting to the workforce of the future, to spinning up innovation labs, and really advancing that next generation educator and next generation education. So I'm really excited to invite to the center of Olympic Stadium right now, Punya, Sean, and Jodie. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Look, this is the danger of having access to an audio input device. We can give ourselves an applause. and if you're curious, the answer is yes. I've been torturing everybody with that ever since I got access. Let me just go ahead and I'm just going to share my screen here to get this thing kicked off and going. And there we go. So Sam, thank you again for just the warm welcome, and just on behalf of all of us, we're thrilled to be joining everyone today and sharing in the work that we've been doing. So as you mentioned, I'm joined today by Jodie Donner and Punya Mishra. And I do want to, before we get going, just want to send a special shout out to someone who's not represented on this slide, is Ben Scragg. He was originally supposed to be presenting with us, but due to some unforeseen personal emergency, he was not able to, but he is doing great, and everything is okay there. So we welcome him with us today in spirit to join us, but next time he'll have to be here with us for sure. So what we're going to kind of talk about today is we're going to try to weave this story. Specifically, we're going to be kind of talking about the story that contains uncertainty, disruption, and resilience. One of the things that we have been doing, so we're going to kind of cherry pick and focus a little bit on these sort of these innovation labs known as the Ignited Labs that we out of the Teachers College have created. And these are essentially hands-on emerging technology, creative spaces that are meant for students and faculty and staff to explore and create with things like artificial intelligence and programmable robots, experiment with AR, and mixed reality, develop podcasts, explore Internet of Things devices and things like that, and also engage in like maker activities with 3D printers and laser cutters. And so we launched officially we have 3 physical locations of these labs across the ASU network in the Phoenix Valley area. And we have formally launched officially in the fall of 2019, and things were going great. We were making really good, strong progress. We felt really empowered by the reactions and the interactions between the people and the things and the ideas that were starting to come out there. And we really were like, this is great. This is exactly what we were planning for and hoping for. And then, as everyone is more than painfully aware, enter a massive global disruption, right? One that is the most disruptive event that's happened in recent history, to which everyone, I'm sure, in this call today has had some level of disruption that you felt in your life as a result of COVID-19, either directly or indirectly. And as you can imagine, so here we are, we're just into our second semester of full operation, and everything gets kind of thrown into the void. What are you going to do? We closed our labs along with ASU, moving to fully remote in mid-March. And then it sent us scrambling, Jodie and I specifically scrambling to try to think, okay, how are we going to transition in this world of change and uncertainty? Now what? All the wind was taken out of our sail sort of abruptly. So how are we going to work on that? And this is sort of a key point of you'll hear from all 3 of us today, and kind of reiterating that throughout this story, throughout these tales and looking at all these different things, what we're not doing is we're not predicting the future, right? But what we are doing is that we're designing in a principled manner to build resiliency in these educational systems so that they're prepared to handle this uncertainty, right? And to do that, we've sort of split this across 4 different chapters. So first, I'm going to talk about learning futures. I'll hand it over to Punya, who'll discuss some of the challenges of designing educational systems. We'll also look at some strategic foresight tools. So how can we actually, we'll walk through something together. How do we actually do all this? And then Jodie's going to share a lot of information about, specifically in our college, the Ignited Labs. How did we actually build a system built for this kind of uncertainty? And what does that look like to actually see it in action? So without spending any more time, let's just jump right into learning futures. Now, you may have heard the term learning futures in other places or contexts. We don't have exclusivity rights over that term. So when we talk about learning futures, this is what we're talking about. That we view it as this idea, this collection, bringing together collaborative leaders, creative thinkers, and innovative ideas, with the idea of bringing them together to design what could the future look like? What do we want it to look like in terms of advancing equity and excellence in education? And we do all this sort of grounded in this sort of core value of our college around principled innovation. And so when we also talk about learning futures, and you'll start to see a lot of this sort of repeated, that what we're talking about is this idea, this method that's sort of built on these 3 pillars of futures thinking, principled innovation, and design. And so already I'm using more futures terminology by talking about futures thinking. So futures thinking is one of the pillars of learning futures. But to understand what futures thinking is again, clarifying what it isn't, right? And again, it is not predicting the future, right? That we are not in that game. That's a game I wouldn't want to be in. And if I could do it, honestly, I'd be a billionaire on a yacht right now and, making, whatever, enjoying the sun on a secluded high-tech yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean. But I'm not. So obviously predicting the future is not my game. So what it is, when we think about futures thinking, this is really a mindset, right? It's a philosophy, and it draws its roots from the broader academic discipline of futures studies. So another futures term. But essentially, when we boil futures thinking down to a single sentence, right? It is the act of evaluating different types of global emerging trends and informing our strategic plans on how to handle the uncertainty that those bring with it, right? So again, what we're not doing is predicting the future, but we're preparing for the future. We're preparing to be agile to handle these things. And I had mentioned, again, this idea, this broader academic discipline of future studies. And essentially what we draw from there is this idea of the 3 futures, right? So Wendell Bell is credited with coining this phrase, this term that's used, that the purpose of future studies is to discover or invent, examine and evaluate and propose possible, probable, and preferable futures, right? So that's kind of, if you're already been asking that question of why does Sean keep talking in the plurality of futures? This is why, right? So we use that very intentionally. We don't say the future of learning. We call it the futures, intentionally, because we're really talking about, anytime we're talking about this future state, we're including the fact that all of these eventualities can end up in sort of these 3 categorical futures. Probable, this is just what's closest to us, right? You can have a pretty good probable understanding of the future. The sun will come up tomorrow. Plausible, right? It's a little bit out of reach. It's a little bit further down the timeline. You can see things, but it may not be very clear. And then of course the possible, this is sort of the far outreach. So if you want to, ascribe times to this, plausible or possible could be 30 years, 100 years, something like that, where you're really starting to look at what are the possible utopian or even dystopian type of outcomes of something. And really our whole goal, again, is, while we're not predicting the future, but what can we do to build towards the most desired of those future states? But when we're talking about all of this, right, we can't know the future. It by its definition is uncertain. And as we've seen, COVID-19 has done many things. One of the things, if we're looking for silver linings out of this issue, one of the things is that it's raised our awareness about how suddenly a system or ecosystem or a context or an organization can be caught off guard by this massive disruption, this uncertainty, what happens. And one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to look for, where do these come from? How do we be aware of these different things that can come up, right? Innovations that we create, meaning, the human race, the things that we create, the technology innovations that we create are not, they're not in isolation. They're value laden. They bring with it, biases and intentionality from the group of people or the society that creates them. We have global scale, right? Things that happen. They could be climate events. They could be, other pandemics, things like that, black swan events. I mean, that's a big piece. That's my home in the ShapingEDU community, tends to come out of the black swan group with Ruben. And so thinking about where do these things come from? We can't be experts in all things. So one of the tricks that we're trying to also kind of cover with this is thinking about how do we become aware? Now this slide, this global megatrends, the hope here is it's a little confusing and a little overwhelming, because that's the point. This is just one of these things. This is not meant to confuse anybody, but to draw the sort of the point that these are this is just done from the Copenhagen Institute of Future Studies, for example, of all the major identified megatrends that are happening around the world. And there's a lot of them, right? And so you can start to get a picture that from a global perspective of all of the sort of variables and moving pieces that are all happening simultaneously, and understanding that whatever your context may be, right? In a school system, a lab inside of a teacher's college, a business, startup, things that happen on one side of the globe or in one of these other megatrend sectors may have a direct or indirect impact on you and your business. A little bit more simplified, this is another way of thinking about where does uncertainty come from. This one is more specifically thinking about from a technology perspective, whether you're in education or public health, right? The technology, there's a thread. All these things are connected to one another. So again, no one is going to claim, and in our work, we certainly don't suggest that people become experts in all of these fields to be, keenly aware, but really is the idea of being sort of cognizant about the fact that in your area, things that are out of your control that are happening in other sectors may have a direct impact. So it will, in terms of, as we'll start talking about some of the methodology later, is thinking about how do I make sure that I'm aware of these things? What kind of trends do I need to be aware of? When should it hit my radar that I should be concerned or interested about it? But as we think about the disruptions, in this case, specifically brought to us with technology, one of the things that we focus on here as well is sort of preparing for this emergent epoch of disruption, right? The fourth industrial revolution. This is marked as this convergence of physical, digital, and biological technologies and systems along with them. One of the key things here is that this technology has the sort of touted pace to sort of outpace any previous expansion of human innovation in terms of its speed and scale. And you can see some of the things. These are a lot of things that are going to be probably talked about, the next couple of days too. Artificial intelligence, the role that starts to play, Internet of Things device, especially when we're talking about smart cities, smart campuses, what is the role between these technologies and the humans behind them, and that will be interfacing with them. So I just want to share a quick quote here from Professor Klaus Schwab, who's the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, who's also one of the sort of, the foremost scholars on the fourth industrial revolution, sharing that because of this potential scale and the potential impact that this new industrial revolution era will have, is this quote that from the perspective of human history, there has never been a time of greater promise or potential peril. Right. And so that sort of sets up this kind of lofty thing. Well, how are we going to navigate this? How are we going to handle some of this information? And one of the things, the question that often comes up when we start talking about this, the fourth industrial revolution is how is it different from the previous ones? What marks the difference between this one and let's say the third digital revolution that came before us? And we've seen, with the first industrial revolution, we've got things, we transitioned from handmade goods to manufacturing. Second revolution gave us electrical power, automobiles. It led to the first globalization of people and ideas. And in the third industrial revolution, the one we were sort of just coming out of, that gave us things like microprocessors, cloud computing, smartphones, and marked the beginning of the information age. So then what is so important about this fourth industrial revolution? Why are people starting to raise alarm bells, if you will, about what it means? And really it can be boiled down to these three concepts, right? The velocity, the scope, and the system's impact. If the promise comes true, right? If the pace of innovation continues, right? As a collective human race, we don't have a reference for the speed, size, and level of disruptions that we're expecting to occur during the fourth industrial revolution, right? So this starts to beg the question, are we ready to handle these innovations and disruptions? If not, how do we become ready? And already today, even what might be described by future historians as the very nascent beginnings of this fourth industrial revolution, we're already seeing that. We're seeing issues being raised about artificial intelligence and facial recognition systems being used for surveillance or police activities, and the issues that raises, right? That they have problems, it's not represented fairly across populations and things like that. So it's really starting, even now, it's already starting to raise some of these issues. And so Schwab and Davis sort of have posited that the fourth industrial revolution really brings forth these three pressing challenges, right? Fair distribution. We know in the history, right, that innovations and advancements in technology across the other industrial revolutions are not distributed fairly, right? The wealthiest of the group get access first. So how do we handle that? Especially if these innovations are set to outpace anything we've experienced before. Externalities of risk, right? How do we ensure that we're not harming vulnerable populations, right? How are we going to be intentional about including them? And then perhaps one of the biggest piece is this idea of being human-led or human-centered, right? This humanistic approach. How do we ensure that as we're going down this way as a society, remember, Schwab's statement, it's the potential for the greatest promise or peril. And I think a lot of that sort of leans on this. And that's sort of where a lot of our work comes in, and some of the things that we've been doing around, again, one of our pillars is this idea of principled innovation. So in short, what is that, right? Well, it's this idea of asking these questions, right? Being reflective intentionally ahead of time. Just because we can build something, should we, right? And not to say that we shouldn't, but to really explore, what does that mean? What are the unintended consequences of the things that we build? When we're going down and thinking about artificial intelligence or anything like that, are we unintentionally marginalizing an underrepresented group? And if so, how do we fix that? How do we combat that? How do we change that so that's not the issue? And so again, just kind of coming back, so when we talk about learning futures, what we're really talking about is this collection, right? That we're bringing together collaborative leaders, creative thinkers, innovative ideas to try to develop this humanistic system, right? And doing that through some of these things that we've already explored today in terms of the futures thinking, a little bit of the principled innovation, and then design. So as we kind of just look back at this first little chapter, right? So disruptions can come from anywhere, right? All other trends aside, future pandemics, hopefully not, but those things aside, climate events, the fourth industrial revolution will usher in new technology disruptions. And as we innovate and adapt and change, how do we ensure a humanistic approach to those? Again, we're not trying to predict the future. We're preparing for the future by building in resilience in our systems to succeed in those uncertain times. And now I would like to welcome Dr. Punya Mishra, who's our Associate Dean for the college, and he will go over a bunch of the challenges with design and education. Punya?
I start the new year on my first big Zoom meeting by forgetting to unmute myself. Some things never change. Thank you so much, Sean. And thank you, everybody, for being here today and for inviting us for this. My name is Punya Mishra, and I'm Associate Dean for Scholarship and Innovation at the Teachers College. And if one way of thinking about what Sean was discussing is that we live in a world now which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, what people have called a VUCA world. And at the same time, it is a hyper-connected and interdependent world. So if you just think about from, let's say, February of 2020 till mid-March, in literally 2 months, 1.6 billion learners were thrown out of the educational system when schools and everything closed down. That's just 2 months. And that was something that started in one part of the world and affected all of us the same way. But you can think about that, that's the sort of the crazy part of the virus and its spread. But at the same time, we saw a global coming together of scientists, like within weeks of the virus, its DNA had been, its nuclear had been analyzed and publicly shared with other scientists, and people have started working on vaccines like back in mid to late February. So this hyper-connected, interdependent world that we live in, the question then becomes is, how do we prepare our educational systems? How do we prepare our students, our educators to deal with this kind of uncertainty? And as Sean mentioned, we see this work around learning futures, which is around developing humanistic systems, because the humans are at the center of it, through these sort of three pillars: futures thinking, which Sean has sort of briefly talked about, and then we'll talk about a little bit more in terms of methodologies. He mentioned this idea of principled innovation, the idea that any decisions we make have to be driven by a conversation about the deeper values that we bring to the task. And finally, that this is not just about talk, it is really about design. It is about actively trying to create that future that we want to create. And so the piece that I'm going to focus on is this idea of design and how it plays out in educational contexts. So Herbert Simon, wrote this book called The Sciences of the Artificial, which is sort of, he first time spoke about this idea that just as we have natural science and we have the humanities, there is a third way of knowing, of being in the world, a discipline, which is the science of design. And he defined design as being, David Perkins defined design as being a structure adapted to a purpose. So when you think about anything that we see in education around us, it really is a consequence of the way the system has been designed. So for instance, if you think about educational systems, and we often sort of say, oh, our students are not creative, or our students are not getting the deep conceptual knowledge that they want to do, it is because the system is designed that way. So if students don't enjoy school, it's because schools have been designed that way. If students are not creative, they are not thinking outside of the box, and they're not being innovative, they are not engaged, because the system has been designed this way. I think that's really important for us to understand. And it's important to understand that the important role that education plays in creating our present and our future. And if you look at a lot of the challenges that we face today, it's because of sort of lapses in our educational system. So there are many reasons for the global challenges we face, but among them, the key is a failure to imagine what education can and should be. And coming back to this idea of living in this world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is how do we design education for this kind of a world? How do we prepare our students for this kind of a world? How do we design systems and organizations that are resilient? So as Sean said, it is not that we can predict the future. If that was the case, life would be so much easier. However, what we can do is create systems and structures which can respond to challenges that emerge. And there will be more of those. The pandemic is just one example, and Sean mentioned a whole bunch of others that are there. And it seems to me that seems to us that the first step is to recognize this fact that everything in education is designed. One of my favorite quotes is from Steve Jobs, where he said that life is much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you was made up by people no smarter than you. And you can change it, you can influence it, and you can build your own things. And I think that when we think about universities and schools and colleges, the Carnegie unit, when we think about the 50-minute period that you go to one classroom and then you run to another one, all of these things have been just made up by us. And once we acknowledge that fact, it gives us the freedom to go and change and tweak it. And I think that the heart of the learning futures is this optimistic vision of how we can transform the systems that we have, because they were just made by people like us with the best of intentions or historical legacies which have created the structures, but we can change and so I want to give a couple of examples of how systems which are really resilient can deal with it. So once the COVID-19 hit, there were sort of dramatically different responses by educational institutions to sort of COVID-19. So one was this one, which is you had school districts which basically went sort of froze. And they said, okay, I'm just going to put my head in the sand. And until and unless somebody out there helps me or decides for me what I should do, I'm just going to be waiting here. Or I'm going to meet the needs of only those students who have access to technology and so on. And we'll figure out the rest of the students, we will figure it out later. As opposed to that, we had other institutions which saw this as an opportunity to really rethink and reimagine what they do. I have been having these conversations for the past 40 weeks now. I can't believe it's been 40 weeks every Saturday. It's with Young Zhao from Kansas, Chris Dede from Harvard, Kurt Bong from Indiana, Scott McLeod from Colorado, and myself. We have been inviting a range of people from across the world, educators. Would love for you to join in if you can this Saturday as well. And what we have been seeing is educators or leaders, education leaders who have taken a very, very different stance towards this COVID-19 crisis. And in a large part, it has been because of stuff that they did before that prepared them to deal with this unexpected challenge. I'm going to share two stories with you. The first one is the school called the Spark School, which is here in our local Kyrene School District. The Office of Scholarship and Innovation and Ben, who Sean mentioned, worked over 2 years with the school district to develop this new vision for what a school can be. This is a large 4 or 5 classrooms where the walls were knocked down, where we have students working in problem-based, project-based learning, connecting with people in the community. Instead of one teacher for a bunch of students, we have an array of adults who surround the students and give them the kind of support that they need. What's interesting about Spark School is that when COVID-19 hit, and I can go on and on about the school, but I'm sensitive to the time here. What's interesting is once COVID hit, the way the Spark School responded was very different from the way the rest of the district responded. And in fact, they said that, our students are ready to do this remote learning because we have prepared them. They are ready for independent learning and work. We are more connected with the parents and the broader community. And so we are going to approach this differently. And however, that was not something that could have happened unless certain core values, certain core principles had already been baked into the system, a core value of respecting student autonomy and agency, a core value of respecting teacher autonomy and agency, of providing tools and techniques for them to be resilient learners. That happened before, not after COVID hit. The second example I want to share is the Urban Discovery Schools. Sean Lesher, who's a really good friend of mine who got his EDD from our EDD program, in which Jodie is currently a student, and so is Ben for that matter. And I had a conversation with him about how his school district sort of responded to the COVID-19 crisis. And one thing that struck me very, very interestingly was, and this is where I think the whole approach to thinking as a designer comes in, that you always try to design for the extremes, and then the sort of the bell-shaped curve, the middle chunk will actually take care of itself. So a good example is, the potato peeler. Where you want to design not for the person who's the average person, you want to design for the hands of a football player as well as a grandmother who has arthritis. That if you can design a peeler that works for these two, guess what? For all of us in the middle, it's going to be just fine. And I think what Sean Lesher did and his team did was the first step they took is, who are the students who are going to drop through, who are going to fall through? We have to reach them first. So these are the second language learners. These are the learners who have special needs. Let's reach out to them and start from there, create our curriculum structures, create our support for that group. Because once we reach that, anything we do will apply across the board. And again, to emphasize, this is not something that they did once COVID hit. This had to be built into their way of thinking. This had to be built into the systems and structures that they had in place. This had to be designed. And so coming back to Herbert Simon and his quote, where he says that everyone designs who devises courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. And if you think about what we do in education, that's exactly what we do. We try to go from existing situations to make it better. And so when we think about design and systems, we have to think about a couple of things. One, since we cannot predict the future, we have to design systems which can pivot, which can change, which can hold true to their primary goal. And that cannot be done unless it is founded or driven by certain core values that help us resolve these dilemmas as they emerge. Because COVID-19 threw a lot of dilemmas in our face. And I think Jodie will talk a little bit about some of the work that they did in the Ignited Labs to confront these dilemmas. And the answer to those dilemmas lay really in a deeper conversations and values that had been built in earlier. Some of the work that we've been doing in this space of design and education, because when we talk about design, people often think about the design of a product, whether it's a cell phone or so on. And so when we talk about design in education, what is it that we are talking about? And so we have this idea of this, that design plays out across 5 different spaces in education. And very briefly, I have, if you want to know more about this, please reach out to me. I can drop my email and contact information below. This is some work that we have been currently involved in. There are lots of resources that we have for you to learn more. At one level, but I'm just going to give a brief overview. At one level, when we talk about design in education, we are talking about the design of artifacts. So whether it might be a piece of software, it might be a laptop device, it might be a chair. Sean Lesher has a great essay about the position of a desk in a classroom. That the position of a desk in a classroom determines the power dynamics of interaction between students and teachers. So artifacts have value, have meaning. The other thing that as educators we design processes. Processes could be a lesson plan or other procedures for achieving a goal. The third thing that as educators design, which I think is critical, is the nature of the student learning experience. Like, how do we provide them opportunities? So whether it is the ceremonies of graduation or whether it is how we design online learning or remote learning, it is the nature of the student experience, deeply understanding their needs, their interests and passions. And so this, if you think about education or teachers, these were 3 things I think that teachers typically had been thinking about. They'd been thinking about what kinds of tools, whether it's textbooks, software that I need, what are the processes, lesson plans, and what are the kind of experience I can design through that. But I think that if we truly have to think about sustainable, resilient design, we have to go beyond this. We have to think about systems and we have to think about culture. So systems and culture are the skeleton on which everything else builds. Unless you have a system in place that can pivot and be resilient, it's not going to change, or it's not going to be able to address these challenges that emerge. If you don't have a broader culture, which is questioning of assumptions, has a core set of shared goals and values, you're not going to be able to make a difference. So coming towards sort of the end of my piece here, before throwing it back to Sean, is that what this means that all of us as educators, we are all designers. We are designers not just of curriculum, but also of systems, of culture. And that's an important thing to understand, that it's only through that our systems can build resilience. Second, underlying it are these core values and mission that we bring to the task. So that's the sort of component of principal innovation. And that this is an act of design. This is not an act of sitting and understanding it, but it is an act of actually going in. And if you think about design, what design is always about is prototyping. You test something out, you learn from it, you go back and tweak it. So all design is redesign. And I think, and it is action oriented, it is optimistic. There are many different ways that we can think about sort of how we think about the future, and there are tools for that. And as Sean said, and I repeat, this is really not about predicting the future. That's not the game we are in. What we are is about how do we design for futures that we cannot predict, but do it in a principled manner. And so I'm going to throw this back to Sean. And again, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to all of you and have him talk about some tools and methodologies for strategic foresight. Sean?
Great. Here, well, let me throw in a little applause for you. Again, I apologies. This could be terribly annoying with me at the soundboard. So thank you, Punya. I think that was a really nice way of sort of emphasizing the challenges and the needs and the importance of the design, that it's not just about talk, right? It's about doing. And that's a great segue into this component, which I know anyone who was like, I want to, pop into a keynote at 9 a.m. in the morning and I want to get roll my sleeves up and get into some methodology. But that's what we're going to do. And hopefully the goal here is that this is going to be a guided walk through it. And really the goal here is to emphasize how easy this is to get to do and how you can do it. I want to kind of start this section off by basically a prompt from a very prominent futurist, Amy Webb, who's the founder and CEO of the Future Today Institute, which we'll hear more about in here in just a moment. But this came out back, I believe it was around April of earlier in this now I can say it's no longer this year, of 2020, where she was basically prompting 3 questions that all executive teams need to be asking themselves, right? What is the early warning system for disruption? What are the escalation triggers that prompt us to take action? And how are we making data-driven decisions about our futures, right? And the key here was, if that leadership is not able to answer these questions, that's a warning sign, right? And then what that warning sign is that perhaps you need to be engaging in some strategic foresight so that you can answer these questions. Or if, for example, if you don't know how to answer these questions, that should be in some level a red flag that's sort of going up saying, perhaps we're not prepared for uncertainty the way we thought we were. And so that sort of leads to this idea of strategic foresight. Now, going way back when I first was talking about futures thinking, right, this mindset of looking at trends and trying to develop action plans based on this. What are we going to do about these things that we can't control, or how are we going to respond to them? Well, that's what strategic foresight is. This is a tool set, or you can think of it, this is the professional application of futures thinking, right? So the idea here is that we use a set of tools that either exist, or you can create your own, of course, that help as an organization or a context, helps us steer towards that preferable possible future, right? If you think about those 3 futures, we want to have the best outcome for ourselves, our organization, our system. But how do we get there? And more importantly, perhaps, how do we avoid potential problems or, existential issues, right? Things that could put our business, out of commission, could have massive setbacks to our organization. So it's really about sort of exploring these things. I do want to share here. So this is again, we can share a lot of these. We'll be able to share a lot of these resources when we're finished, but I want to draw your attention to the Future Today Institute. And I do want to just mention here in full disclosure that I was a Future Today Institute Summer Fellow back in 2018, which is why we're going to see a lot of very heavy FTI stuff. They are not the only strategic foresight group or organization out there. There are many. So this is just one example. And for example, they have 11 tools that are available and freely open to the public that are licensed under Creative Commons. But we're going to just cover briefly one and then more in depth a second one. But these are, I encourage you, if you like what we're going to go through and you can see some value in it, I highly encourage you to go to their website, check them out. A lot of their tools are already in use. Their line here is that it's in hundreds of companies and government agencies and college courses around the world. And FTI really does invite you to explore and engage their tool set in your own context. And because it's under Creative Commons, you are free to do so. It's a really great organization, and Amy Webb is a really fantastic individual who spent a lot of energy and effort trying to raise the awareness of the need of strategic foresight around the globe, regardless of industry or application. And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at a couple of them. This is the first one that I want to draw your attention to, and we're not going to spend much time on this. I just want to use this to sort of set your mindset here as we go into the next piece. And that is this thing about thinking about time in a different way. Historically, organizations, boards, whatever it is, tend to think about time in this, what we call a time trap, 1 to 3 years, right? It's their strategic development. It's what we need to get to the next board meeting. It's the next semester, it's the next academic year. It's in sort of a futurist time thinking, it's very short term. And one of the challenges then is, as we know, right, if you think back to that megatrends thing, all those different sources of uncertainty and disruptions, they're constantly evolving, constantly changing, in flux, reacting with one another. And so what's really important as a leadership, or as even an individual, if you're doing this on your own context, is learning to think about time in simultaneous modalities, right? Near term and long term sort of at the same time. This is sort of illustrated by this, often I would say even overused. So I took the liberty to overuse it myself. This sort of old proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is right now, right? So, we can always think about that in terms of time. How do we start to prepare for something down the line if we don't begin now? Right? We'll get to that stage and wish we had done, that leads right into the phrase, hindsight's 2020, if we had only known. But that's part of it, is as an organization, how do we start thinking about that intentionally so that we can hopefully try to make that? Right now for today, like I said, I just want to show you this to kind of set your mind as we think about uncertainty. Because not only can they come from those mega trends, they can come from all over the place, they can also show up in different timelines. So if we think about these, these things in terms of how they sort of show up, right? So a key takeaway of this cone of time would be this, right? To be best prepared, it takes effort to think about your system or your context in more than one simultaneous timeline, right? Taking care of the business that's close to you and that tactical zone of 12 to 24 months, but also being aware of the systems level disruptions. What are the things that could come out? What's coming? What can you do today to be better prepared for uncertainty tomorrow, right? While you may not face an immediate threat in the next 3 months, but what about next summer? Right? What's going to happen? What are the things that are changing? What's the political landscape? What are the legislation impacts potential to come down in regulation or things like that maybe today aren't going to impact your business, but in 6 months, a year may have dramatic impact. And so up to this point, we've been talking a lot about all this uncertainty, right? We know where it comes from. It can come from global changes, megatrends. We've looked at some of these sources of disruptions. We've established that we need to, keep our eyes on the horizon, think about time differently in this multimodal ability. But what about all that uncertainty, right? What happens when we recognize something? Maybe it is a pandemic like COVID-19 or something else, or a global climate event, a geopolitical event, who knows, right? Conflict that arises somewhere on the other side of the globe. How do we start to handle this information? And to sort of answer that question of how can we intentionally build resilience into our systems is where we come to strategic foresight, right? We can actually use a tool to help us see how to do that. And the one that we're going to be looking at today, again, this is just one of 11 of the different types of tools that FTI has available for you to use, is this thing called the axis of uncertainty. And this is a real effective, simple tool that basically generates these 2x2 matrices that allows you to sort of create these little narratives that the idea here is that they help identify or raise new issues or concerns about risk or opportunity that you might not have been aware of. And so to do that, I'm just going to walk you through this guided tour. It's a very quick 6-step process. And the idea here is, to keep in mind that you don't need to be trained to do these, right? This few minutes I'm going to walk through one of these, that's enough to get going. You don't have to be a professional. There is no official exam you have to pass or anything like that to be qualified to use these tools. You can use them right now. And so we're going to do that. And later, after I'm done with this part too, we'll see from Jodie how the Ignited Labs has used a lot of these techniques to survive over the last half of 2020 and beyond. And so we'll look at some real life examples of this as well. So step one. Okay, so step one of this, I think, and Jodie too. Jodie's probably going to pipe in, and I encourage disruption from Jodie on this as well. But step one, when you're thinking about your context, your organization, your whatever, right? The first thing is to brainstorm external uncertainties, right? So these are the things that we have no control over, right? And Jodie, I don't know if these are ones that so these are real examples.
Definitely. So, thinking about our context and the greater context of ASU, higher ed, and beyond that, we have to consider some of these things, such as what if a mild pandemic occurs every year now? So we have seasons of potentially COVID-19, Or on the other side of that, maybe it's contained in 2021 and we don't revisit it. Perhaps another external uncertainty, students transition to fully remote, and that's the change that we see. That's what's going to happen, and we have to adjust to that. Or perhaps there's temporarily remote, hybrid type situation, or in and out, which of course we know we've been experiencing that. Another external uncertainty could be COVID-19 increases the investment in educational technology. We definitely have seen other changes in ed tech because of COVID-19. A lot of organizations trying to capitalize on that, not necessarily effectively. Or perhaps we have a decrease or no change in investment in educational technology, and we have to mitigate those. So we have to consider then, how do we handle these, and what are the potential futures coming from them?
Yeah, excellent. And just to note here, I mean, on the left-hand side here, you'll see some sort of categories. And what the idea here is when you're brainstorming external uncertainties, these are things you have no control of, and it helps to sort of categorize them as you come across them. So step 2, once you've identified things that are out of your control, right? And again, thinking about those mega trends, thinking about those things, you can be as wild with those as you want, right? I mean, this week alone, right? There's a lot of political activity happening today, right? So something to pay attention to. What happens, right? There is 3 months ago, we would have been talking about the presidential election. Like there's an inflection point, right? What will happen after that? Does that change things? Is that's something that's out of our control? In terms of, you have a small bit of control on that with your power to vote, but other than that, it's out of your hands. You can't control what other people are doing. The second step is to turn that lens internally. So these are internal uncertainties. These are things that you might have control over: your budget, professional development, research and development, marketing. What are some uncertainties there that you're feeling? And again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. That's what the key. These are hopefully fun, and you can do these again. I would encourage you can do them on your own or in small groups or as part of like a leadership activity. They're a great way to do this. So you just brainstorm these things down, right? And when you're doing that, just like we saw in this first one, you sort of set up these poles, these like north-south poles, if you will. Like, for example, something like the pandemic, it's done or it's here forever, right? So you kind of set up these extreme ends of those. Then once you get, this is just an example here too, of just how you might categorize them. Again, this is up to you how to do this. This can just be a way, if you build a spreadsheet one time, you can reuse it, a million times over if you want. But to sort of categorize those into things like perhaps, economic or social or technological categories, right? Of course, you can make your own to whatever makes sense to you and your organization. But the key is that you're categorizing them in some fashion. Then we get to the fun part. All right. So step 3. So once we've gotten these lists, and we have a whole bunch of different kinds of uncertainties that we've identified. Then this is where the axis of uncertainty really comes in here. And what we basically do is you choose 2 different uncertainties that you've identified, and you oppose them to each other, right? So you basically take them and you put them on opposing axes here. And as a pro tip, really the goal, so keeping this in mind while you're doing it, right? And again, a lot of people want to do it the right way first. And I really want to try to emphasize there is no right way. It's fine. You make mistakes, you scratch it off, you try another one. You can do this formally on, somewhere, or you can do this on the back of a napkin or scratch paper, even with just a pen and paper. But the idea here as a pro tip is we're trying to surface new interactions of uncertainties. So it may seem sometimes counterintuitive, but one thing that can be very valuable with this methodology is trying to pick different uncertainties that you might never have thought to pair together before. If you're surfacing stuff that is, you're like, oh yes, this just confirms my suspicion that, if we don't have any customers, we have no money. Yep, that's a very, nothing wrong with that, but you're probably already thinking about that. So one of the trick is when you're looking at your categories is to try to pick things that you might not necessarily put them together. And so using the examples that we had on that first slide that Jodie kind of walked through, I'm just going to show you how this works. So if we're going to pick the COVID-19 situation. I know we're all hoping it goes away, but we're going to talk about the one that's a little bit more fuzzy. right? So the investment in educational technology. So on one hand, we say it increases, and on the other hand, we say it basically stays stagnant or maybe even worse. And then we're going to oppose that with this sort of internal / economic category of what students do, right? They transition to fully remote and stay that way, or they go remote only temporarily, right? And in real life, we're seeing a mix of this, right? In the real situation. So here we put them on the axis. It doesn't matter which way you put them on, but I've chosen to go this way. So on the x-axis here, we have the COVID implications on the investment in ed tech, and on the y-axis, or sorry, I had that inverted. The y-axis is the impact in investment, and on the x-axis here is the student behavior. Okay, so as we go into the next slide, so once we have these mapped, then the key is that we start to build in headlines for each of these quadrants that are created here on our axes. And the idea here is that these should be short and sweet. They don't need to be perfect. They don't even need to be good. What they should do is draw out scenarios, and hopefully ones you haven't already thought of. And again, there is no right answer here. And if you get stuck and can't think of one, just skip it and do the other ones. And then maybe you can come back to it and write a headline. But if we look at this according to the stuff that we have put in, so for example, here in this top right quadrant here, so we have COVID-19 increases investment in ed tech, and students are only temporarily remote. So the headline here is students learn through adaptive classroom technology or high flex and hybrid learning spaces. So that's a positive outcome. Things are going well because of that investment. Things are happening. Students are still learning. But if we look down here, so students are temporarily remote still, but there has been no increased investment in ed tech, right? So maybe a headline reads, students fall behind in learning goals as a result of poor distance learning options. Students disenroll, right? Then over here, if we look at, again, increase in ed tech is higher, but in students transition fully remote and stay that way, right? Students thrive in cutting edge remote learning systems. Fully remote learning provides new opportunities for vulnerable populations. And then conversely, if we look down here, so again, students are fully remote and staying that way, but there's been no increase or importance placed in ed tech. Students disengage with programs and universities, sending unprecedented retention issues across higher education, right? So bad outcome. And again, I just made these up. Jodie and I working on these together, these are what we came up with. There's no right or wrong way to do this, right? The idea is that you're trying to craft a narrative that will create a scenario that you can respond to, because that's what happens here in step 5. So once you have your little narratives built, the next thing that's helpful to do is to start to label those quadrants with what type of opportunity or risk they represent. So you might have some that represent more than one. These labels can be reused. So as we start to think about this, we can attach these labels to our own quadrants here. So for example, students learn through adaptive classroom technologies. A lot of this, you can see this right now at ASU with ASU Sync and things like that. That's a near-term opportunity, right? This was aggressively sought after, and this is how we started the fall semester after a spring where we had to just quickly, switch to remote. That allowed people to have a different opportunity. If we stay remote and continue to increase our investment, this is a long-term opportunity, right? This might be, what if a remote option for higher education, for example, is a permanent choice, right? It's no longer just a temporary one, but ASU Sync or things like that exist as just a now standard mode of how you would engage with your your curriculum and things like that. Near-term risk, right? Students fall behind. That's not good. So we can identify that as a risk. And then even a potential existential risk. If students are disenrolling and saying, this is a terrible experience, I'm out of here, forget you, I don't want this anymore, I'm going somewhere else. That to our business, of course, could represent something even as high as an existential risk, or certainly a long-term to risk as well. And so once you've sort of identified these, the last piece here is the so what. Okay, so we've taken two uncertainties, we've put them against each other, and we've quickly sort of raised these opportunities and risks. So now the idea is, how are we as an organization, as a system, how are we going to respond to these? And this is where the real power comes in, is as you start to go through multiple versions of these, right? So now you might circle a few of these near-term opportunities, near-term risk. What are the things that as an organization we need to respond to right now? Or what are the things that might inform our planning or decision making for maybe longer term opportunities or longer term risks, how to navigate away from them. And it really gives us an opportunity to now start to do a whole bunch of these. So now go back and pick 2 different uncertainties, map those. What do those surface? And so this also really helps add a tool that you can then go, whether you are part of the senior leadership or you're taking this to senior leadership, you can show, like, I think here's some things decisions that I think are going to inform our strategy as we move forward, so that we're best prepared for this uncertainty that we're facing today. And also so that we kind of see these longer term opportunities or risks, and how do we as an organization, how can we adapt or prepare for those in a way that makes sense. And so now that we sort of looked at this whole tool together, I want to invite Jodie to walk you through some real world examples and kind of take over and talk about the experiences that we've gone through with the Ignited Lab and sort of how we kind of handle all of this uncertainty and resiliency. Jodie?
Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Punya, as well, for providing all of that wonderful information for us to consider in the real world context. So I'm going to tell a story about the Ignited Labs and our ecosystem of resilience that we have built. And so I will say that, Sean, next slide for me, please. As Sean mentioned, as we started, we have 3 in-person locations at our campuses in Mesa, Tempe, and Glendale. We're all connected and operated, though, as one staff of the Ignited Labs. Our interactions, services, and functions were all in support of our community in the exploration and integration of emerging technologies. Our visitors considered how emerging technologies are currently affecting educational environments and how they will in the future. In-lab and on-site experiences included visitors coming into our spaces, trying virtual reality, programming robots, printing 3D projects, viewing augmented reality, podcasting in our media studios, a variety of other experiences as well. And then we also frequently took our lab demonstrations out to engage community during college and university events, as well as for conferences. At those events, visitors used iPads to operate robots like Spheros. They learned about coding, they tried VR headsets, and more. We also invited students and faculty members into our spaces to play, learn, get face-to-face help, and just experience all of these different technologies. The picture I'm hoping to paint here is an understanding that hands-on was the norm. We did have a website that included resources and lab information, as well as a blog. In short, though, we did not operate virtually in any capacity. Our functions required many people touching equipment handled by others. Yes, we used alcohol wipes, but that certainly wasn't going to be enough to combat some of those things we were facing. So considering our remote operations as a staff, we knew our staff members were effective because our processes included being remote and using Zoom and Slack to connect our 3 separate locations. So we had that piece in place. We thought we had built and maintained systems with resilience based upon all of the different procedures and things that we had in place. And we were about to find out if we had done that. Tests of our resilience started in March of 2020 when our university closed due to COVID-related conditions, which of course everyone else experienced as well. We had a number of scheduled events and visits that we had to cancel, but of course that would come later. Our first immediate goals were keeping the staff safe and healthy. We closed the labs, which did not accommodate social distancing and included way too many pathways for virus spreading. We started to consider the challenges accompanying the uncertainty. We did have to support and continue to support our students in EDT 180, a general studies technology literacy course, which is available to all majors at ASU. We had a few projects to complete and we wrapped those up. Mostly important to me, we had a staff to continue to employ. As others were losing their jobs around us, I wanted to be sure our staff of 8 educational technology champions, or ETCs, would continue to have paychecks on which to depend. These were all student workers working 10 to 20 hours a week. We also had a full-time management intern relying on the labs staying open as well. As we considered the changes occurring, we talked with other units in the college. I asked the ETCs to write short descriptions of their areas of expertise. My intention was to offer their specific services to units that might benefit from them. I was hoping the ETCs could retain their employment and the Ignited Labs could change our procedures to help others, because we definitely saw that need. All of the descriptions that the ETCs wrote indicated they were creative, quick to learn, technologically fluent. We knew that. However, none considered him or herself a Zoom expert, and not one had produced or facilitated live streaming content. But they soon added these skills to their bios. We discovered the college did have a need for the ETCs, but they had to pivot to remote facilitation to support our college's teacher candidates who needed to complete their teaching residencies and no longer had school sites in which to do that. Through a collaboration between the Office of Professional Experiences, the Office of Digital Learning, our Ignited Labs from the Office of Scholarship and Innovation, and the Marketing and Communications team, we developed a virtual teaching platform in Zoom and YouTube and presented Sun Devil Learning Labs, later to be known as SDLL 1.0, to the community. For the last few weeks of the spring semester, the ETCs provided technology support, shared video creation and recording tips, became masters of YouTube's copyright bots, and led hundreds of teacher candidates to the completion of their teaching requirements. And what we found out, our procedures and operations made our contributions possible. We were already dependent upon Slack and remote communications because we had these disparate locations. We had a skilled team. We capitalized on individual areas of expertise. We constantly employed collaborative problem solving, and we leveraged the strong connections that we had among our team members. We were able to adapt and embrace the ambiguity because our usual operations included futures thinking, principled innovation, and design. Human-led, human-centered ethos drove our decisions. Our culture and preparedness led to our large role in the shift from Sun Devil Learning Labs 1.0 to SDLL 1.5, which became the next installment. This time around, we provided opportunities for learners and a youth organization and extended teaching experiences for our teacher candidates who were still students or who had recently graduated. This installment was in action for 8 weeks between June and July. Founded in principled innovation and human-led, SDL 1.5 included captions and learning guides for Spanish speakers as well as English speakers. All video lessons were available by grade level and content area on YouTube playlists. This particular example of a Spanish learning guide represents how we applied our three constants of futures thinking, principled innovation, and design. We designed a better system for the process of SDLL 1.5, moving from live teaching to on-demand recorded learning lessons with learning guides for community educators to use as they facilitated learning alongside students at home or in youth organizations. 4 ETCs, because we were down to 4 at this point in the summer, edited and uploaded 517 video lessons created by our teacher candidates for students in kindergarten and grades 1 through 8. That equates to 1,034 learning guides also formatted and uploaded as well. We did not do the Spanish translation, by the way, but we did have somebody helping us with that. The on-demand model continued to supplement our teacher candidates in the fall of 2020 in SDLL 2.0. SDLL 2.0 transitioned to live teaching model with the partner districts. Our ETCs played a smaller role, but they continued to edit and upload videos to the YouTube playlists. As we wrapped up SDLL 1.5, we were already into August. We faced a semester of uncertainty and knew we had to move our formerly in-person experiences to virtual. They had kind of been on the back burner because of summer and because of the SDLL 1.5 project. Back to our 3 constants we went. We considered the possibilities, the near-term opportunities, the long-term opportunities, and the risks. How could we continue to function? What changes could we make to help our community in which we were working? And this is the truth here. Ideated, designed, built, revised in less than 2 weeks as a side hustle. I would like to introduce you to the fourth space. Why is it a side hustle? This is what Sean referred to it as in one meeting, and I thought that description was very accurate. Due to the other pressing priorities like SDL 1.5 and our limited staff, we had little time before the semester started to move our labs online while considering our learners and our faculty members. Our primary goal was to replicate in some form our in-lab experiences. Ignited Labs Online became our 4th location or our 4th space and evolved into much more than we thought it could be. Ignited Labs Online includes live virtual drop-in visits, scheduled live visits that are longer, engaging video content such as tech tours, Tech This Out, live and recorded learning sessions, and supplemental resources for learning with technology. Elements support faculty, students, and staff, and other community populations. The community we were accustomed to supporting in person saw drastic shifts in their roles. We centered our transition on finding their needs and meeting them where they were, knowing that might change and require us to shift again. Our human-centered design resulted in developing a virtual representation of what individuals could access in person, But extended into new roles and responsibilities, we realized we had near-term opportunities to seize. Our faculty members needed extra support transitioning to ASU Sync, so our staffers learned how to help them. Our primary focus had been introducing and supporting engagement with emerging technologies in educational environments. We added other learning technologies to our list and focused on digital tools and digital pedagogy. We started creating learning guides, learning sessions, tutorial videos, and other assets. One of our mathematics faculty members heard about 3D printed dot cams. Instead of 3D printing prototypes in single projects, which we were used to doing, we pivoted to dot cam production. We also needed to distribute the dot cams, even though we were not open to visitors, so we provided pickup times throughout the week at our Tempe location, so students and faculty members could get their dot cams. And for those who could not make it to our locations, we developed DIY videos using household materials so remote students could make their own dot cams. Throughout the semester, we maintained a virtual presence, continued to develop assets, and offered support for all students, faculty, and staff. Our preparations for uncertainty were proving to be effective. We experienced some internal conditions that we definitely had not planned for that could have derailed us. 4 ETCs were no longer on our team. So as we started the semester, we dealt with that. We had one who graduated in May, 3 resigned during summer. We had to post positions, interview, hire to replace those 4, which we did in September. ETCs changed, but our culture ensured our operations would continue. We still focused on our constants of having that futures approach, performing with principled innovation, and applying design thinking. We have continued to operate remotely to keep all staff safe, even with COVID diagnoses. We are on our 3rd staff member with COVID. Those 3 with COVID were never around other staff members or visitors, so we mitigated the risk. Even as they've recovered or currently in recovery, we've focused on their well-being as we've continued to support our community. Changes and the unknown are persistent, but so are we. We've nurtured a culture, an ecosystem, an ethos. Regardless of where our locations are or we physically are, these ideals are ingrained. So this slide, hey uncertainty, who's feeling resilient now? This is a really messy looking slide, and it was meant to be because this represents only some of our projects from the last few months. These are all opportunities that were not part of our accomplishments prior to March of 2020. We recognize the near-term opportunities. Now we are definitely looking into and looking out for long-term opportunities. Our ETCs became live streaming producers, webinar supporters, Zoom masters, guide makers, PD presenters, dot cam makers, dot cam distributors, and professional video creators. All of this is part of us, human-led, human-centered. It's who we are. So what's next for us? This axis of uncertainty, which we created yesterday, is one possibility. We're looking for the risks and opportunities and preparing for the unknown that's ahead. We're sure we'll be adding to the examples depicted on that chaotic slide I shared a bit ago. We think we know what this spring semester will bring, but we know that plan could take us off the main highway down a side road very quickly. We'll reroute if conditions require us to do so. Adaptability and flexibility are our friends. If we see a near-term risk or a pothole in the road, we'll take action to avoid it or turn it into an opportunity. Even though we don't see what's ahead on our map, we know we'll navigate what we encounter. Preparations are in place. We have extra snacks in the car, good music on Spotify for the trip, and we're all set. So I mentioned the idea of embracing ambiguity earlier. At this point, I feel like we're reaching out our arms, pulling ambiguity in and giving it a big hug. And while we're at it, I think we're going to ask his big brother uncertainty to jump in for a squeeze too. That's our story, Sean.
Yeah, and it's amazing. I mean, just again, looking back at the accomplishments is, it's just amazing. But I mean, I think this is a great example also, again, just to kind of, chime back in here, the axis of uncertainty. Like this is how we kind of figure this out. These are some of the things, even if you don't know you're doing it like in a, direct methodology, right? You start going through, you start asking these questions. But as we mentioned, when we first were hit with the COVID-19 pandemic back in March, we were thrown for a loop. We didn't know what was the spring semester, how we were going to finish that. Okay, now summer, how we're going to handle that. Okay, now fall, cool. Now fall's over. Now we're in the middle of figuring out the rest of spring ourselves here, but we don't know what summer and fall and spring and summer and fall and spring will like. So this is an ongoing sort of constant activity that we engage with to think about how do we plan for next semester while thinking about next year, so that we can, again, try to take advantage of those opportunities and stay away from some of the risks.
Absolutely. I do want to say that we do know uncertainty is the one constant, but we have invited it and we continue to invite it into our spaces because we've built our systems with resilience, and we're going to be what we need to be to who needs it. And this is the team. So really proud of them and so happy to be part of this team.
Yeah, and so thank you, Jodie. Let me play this for you.
Thank you. All right.
It doesn't get old for me.
No, we all enjoy
For everybody else, that's a different story. But so just hearing some of these things too, just to reiterate, just how proud I am to work with such an amazing set of colleagues that are able to think, not only able to do it, but really take it to heart and embody this type of thinking. So to kind of wrap things up, as you're now probably overly familiar with this slide, which our repetition is intentional. We're not in the business of predicting the future. We are, however, in the business of working with collaborative leaders, creative thinkers, and innovative ideas to develop these humanistic systems that are designed to prepare for uncertainty. And to sum up, some of the experiences that we have gone through in our own context with like the Ignited Labs, they were successful not because we reacted after COVID-19 hit. They were successful because we had baked in this way of thinking, this ethos into our organization, that even as individuals came and went from the group, it still was able to respond in this way, which is an incredible thing. And as a call to action, that's really sort of the idea here, is to encourage everyone else here listening to this, or people you might want to share with, is to start engaging with these tool sets, start engaging with this idea of being prepared for the uncertainty, and how can you intentionally design in your system to build in that resiliency. So on behalf of Jodie, Punya, myself, again, a most sincere thank you for asking us to be able to share our work with you all. For whatever, I would invite any panelists to say anything else that they'd like to. Otherwise, whatever time we have left, we could answer any questions or react to any reactions. So again, thank you all.
Yes, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much, Team Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. That was such a great way to set the stage for the Winter Games. I think the repetition in this case was very effective, because truly it's not about predicting the future. And as someone who may or may not have been involved in predicting the future style projects in the past, I can tell you sometimes that when you do things a certain way, the lists look the same over and over and over again, because you're predicting it for whatever the current world is instead of shaping the world that you want to see. So I think the message really struck a chord, definitely with me, hopefully with the other dreamer doer drivers in the audience. Thank you so much for really opening us up with some big and innovative ideas and a framework to really kind of help scaffold them and also to bring them down to earth. So thank you so much for your time and talent today. And I know I've been giving a few shameless plugs in the Zoom chat as we've been going, but this was indeed just the opening activity for today's festivities and events. There are a plethora of sessions both at 10:45 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, as well as at 11:45 Mountain Standard Time. Those are all viewable on our January 5th breakdown page. Thank you so much, Lara, for posting it. So now is the time, and just a quick humanity break, and then choose which session you want to attend and jump right in. Or if you're feeling like rolling up the sleeves of your goose down jacket, join us for the 90-minute, or excuse me, the 105-minute to be more specific. There will be a break in there somewhere. Hackathon being led by the Learning Futures Collaboratory, where you'll actually get to design and make your own Olympic Village. There is so many great sessions. In fact, the best way to do this, I think, is just to share my screen to kind of show you what we have at a glance for today. And this also will get you kind of acquainted with the day-by-day schedule. So here we are on the January 5th page of the website. We just had an awesome opening ceremony where the torch was lit, the content was lit, and it was fantastic. 10:45, I mentioned a hackathon. Join the Learning Futures Collaboratory for that, or join one of many 10:45 a.m. sessions. There is a session being hosted by the Connective, Stories to Inspire Action and Share Success. That's, I would say, a really great smart city community beginner session, as well as an advanced session. It's really just a great way to hear actionable ideas and examples happening at 2 universities. And that's hosted by the Connective. Adobe has brought to us an Olympic athlete, Kevin McMahon. So you're not going to want to miss their session where he's going to be there and actually talk about lessons learned in the Olympics and how it applies to better instruction in the classroom. If you are on a K-12 bend like I am after hearing from Punya, Sean, and Jodie, join Keith and Kim for Innovating the Future of Learning, Shushing Downhill with Driving K-12 Innovation. And finally, you know, the advent of new smart technologies is proving to be really innovative, but also we know that technology can often exacerbate the digital divide and equity issues. So the Connective is hosting a panel all about breaking down those barriers, and I highly encourage change makers to join that one. And then stay with us, right? We've got something for you all day, every day, as a theme song says, a session almost every hour. Right after the 10:45 a.m. sessions, there are 11:45 a.m. sessions you can choose from, a graduate assistant professional development during and after COVID, which I highly recommend. Equalizing public K-12 education and using technology to do that. We have some student voices, smart sister cities. And this is going to be a really awesome one because each of the cities, you know, kind of across, you know, the Phoenix area have had similar and different ways of dealing with, you know, of advancing smart city efforts. And so you're not going to want to miss that one. And then, of course, feel free to join us for your lunch, or for those of you, you know, in a different hemisphere, it may actually be a dinner for you. We're going to help you showcase your triple axel and some of the future scenarios that Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College team was talking about. We're actually going to start drawing out our own outrageous future scenarios. Then there's going to be a break because we know that between the slopes and the ice rinks, you got meetings to get to, we understand. And so there's going to be a break, and then we're going to be joining each other back in the early evening around the fire in the ski lodge for the State of the Smart Region. You're not going to want to miss the music from Biddy Healy. And then finally, it also bears repeating that this requires a separate free registration. Join us for our après-ski social event, the State of the Smart Region Gala. You're not going to want to miss that one. Thank you, the Connective, and thank you, Cox Business. And with that, I will stop my share and just wish everyone a fantastic series of activities in the slopes and the ice rink, and see you at your 10:45 a.m. sessions. Bye all, thank you.
So the pandemic happened, and we're not laughing. The world is now on thin ice. The Olympics were canceled, but we've got it handled. The torch has been lit, so